Bye-bye. You guys kick ass.
Hi, kids. Is everybody ready to hear an R-rated fairy tale?
Yay!
Because that's what I'm doing. Once upon a time, there was a gentleman who lived in a very fine house and had a very pretty daughter named Ella. The man's wife had died of dysentery years before, so he decided to remarry. His new wife was not kind or pretty. She was downright repulsive, in fact, and the man was lonely and decided to throw caution to the wind anyway. His new wife had 2 daughters of her own, both just as unappealing, and were known behind their backs as the Fugly sisters. Not long after the wedding, the man died suddenly. It was ruled as natural causes, but in actuality was due to his new wife pulling a reverse Scott Peterson. This left Ella in the custody of her stepmother, who was a cruel and thoughtless woman. Both her and her daughters treated Ella horridly. They made her do all the household chores, verbally abused her, and on more than one occasion beat her hard enough to make crisp brown green with envy. The poor girl was always sore, cold, and tired, with ragged clothes that didn't fit. Every evening she would rest by the fire, almost in the cinders and ashes. "Cinderella, what a perfect name for you," jeered the Fugly sisters when they saw her trying to keep warm. Cinderella couldn't help but wonder if, had her stepsisters been black, they would have nicknamed her Ashy Ella. The king and queen of their country had a son who was not married, and just like all overbearing parents, pushed for their son to find a woman and give them grandchildren. They organized a huge ball in the hopes that their son would meet somebody, and sent invitations to the princesses in all neighboring countries, as well as all the prominent houses in their own. When a messenger arrived with the invite at Cinderella's house, there was a vast flurry of excitement. New, extravagant dresses were chosen for the Fugly sisters and their mother, and they talked of nothing but the ball. As the sisters argued over which one would land the prince, Cinderella worked around the clock to prepare their dresses and was barely noticed at all by her family. At last, the day of the ball came. As the carriage drove away to the king's palace with her sisters and mother inside, Cinderella waved them goodbye. A lone middle finger was the only reply she received. She went back inside and sat by the fire, overwhelmed by depression and a desire to pull a Kurt Cobain. In true American Indian fashion, a single tear rolled down her cheek, and just as she was wishing she could have gone to the ball, it fell off her face and landed in the ashes of the fire. Suddenly she realized she was not alone. An older, plump, little lady with a silver wand had materialized out of thin air in front of her. Cinderella was so startled she quite literally shit herself, but it was barely noticeable as she hadn't bathed in nearly a month. The fat lady spoke. "Cinderella, I'm your fairy godmother. Tell me why you crying, girl?" "First off, Cinderella's kind of a derogatory name for me. Would you mind just calling me Ella?" The fairy godmother looked annoyed. "Bitch, I ain't got all fucking night. Why you crying?" "I just wish I could have gone to the ball." "And you gonna, but first we gotta get some shit done, girl." "Oh no, not more housework." "No, hell yes we gonna work. I can't send you off to the ball looking like Nicole Richie. Now go in the garden and fetch me a big-ass pumpkin." Cinderella went out and brought back the largest pumpkin she could find. Her godmother waved the wand and in a flash turned it into a gleaming golden coach. Cinderella was astonished. "That was amazing." Her godmother just laughed. "Girl, that ain't nothing. Now go find me some big-ass mice." "Mice? Well, now who's wasting time?" "Bitch, you better put your inside voice on before I put your ass outside." "We'll do what you weigh. Fine, I don't care." "Stare at your narrow ass aside, girl." Cinderella did, and watched with awe as her fairy godmother waved her wand once again, this time producing 6 horses, a coachman, and 2 assistants, all in shiny uniforms. Cinderella hung her head. "But what about my clothes?" "Bitch, I just turned a pumpkin into a fucking carriage. How about a little gratitude? You think I can do shit about them clothes? God damn." And with that, she waved her wand, turning Cinderella's rags into a shimmering silver gown more glamorous than anything had seen. I said that backwards. Her once bare feet were now encased in a beautiful pair of glass shoes. As she stood there admiring her new attire, she got choked up. Thank you so much." "Girl, I don't even care no more. You know what? I'm only let this magic work till 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, but it's nearly 8 o'clock now. Fine then, you grateful vanilla bitch. It's 1 o'clock now. Well, come on, that's not fair. Now it's midnight. You want to keep going? I ain't gotta help your ass, girl. Fair ain't got shit to do with it. I got a motherfucking plan, aight? She pushed Cinderella into the coach and slapped the horse on its ass, and like that, Cinderella was on her way to the ball. When she arrived, word quickly spread throughout the castle that a gorgeous lady had arrived in such a magnificent carriage and wardrobe that she must either be a princess or the artist formerly known as Prince. Everyone, including the musicians, fell silent as she entered the ballroom. Even the king and queen sat up, overcome by the girl's beauty. The prince, upon seeing her, was aroused immediately. His penis leapt to attention, nearly blowing a hole in his tights as he became harder than it was to follow the storyline of Lost. Without bothering to hide his erection, he approached Cinderella. "May I have this dance?" he asked with a lump in his throat and trousers. "Of course, I'd love to." The prince signaled to the musicians, and they took up their instruments and began playing. The prince took Cinderella in his arms and danced with her. All evening the prince was by her side as if they were Siamese twins, and Cinderella clung to him like a dryer sheet, playing the part of the needy girlfriend to perfection. No one at the ball knew who she was. Not even the Fugly sisters recognized her. After waltzing for over an hour, the prince took Cinderella by the hand and led her out to one of the castle's many private balconies. "I'm having such a wonderful time," Cinderella said. "As am I. You're the most stunning woman I've ever known. Can I ask you something? I've, ever since you came in, had a little bit of tension down there. Would you mind maybe massaging it for me?" Cinderella had never before been intimate with anything other than a spare cucumber she kept hidden inside the floorboards at home. I think so," she replied nervously, "but I don't really know what I'm doing." "That's okay, sweetheart," he said as he stroked her cheek with the back of his finger. "It's easy. I'll guide you through it." He reached down and freed his swollen member from its cloth prison. It was as stiff and rigid as America's drug laws. Cinderella was speechless. She reached out her hand to touch it, but the prince gently stopped her. No, not like that. Use your mouth. It's much warmer than your hand is." Cinderella giggled out of sheer anxiety. She had never practiced that with a cucumber. I'm sorry, I'm just really nervous." "That's perfectly natural," the prince said quickly. "Here, let me help you." He placed his hand on the back of her neck and began pulling her head to his cock. Even though she was scared, she did really like him and wanted to make him happy instead of offended, so she didn't resist and just closed her eyes. The prince let out a small moan as her lips met the top of his penis. He was so erect she could have accurately measured his heart rate as each beat pulsated through his manhood. Cinderella felt her nervousness fading and took more of him into her mouth with a newfound surge of confidence. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she thought to herself as her head bobbed up and down on the prince's bishop like a buoy in the ocean. "I'm so glad he actually likes it." Every flick of her tongue and stroke of her lips brought the prince closer to orgasm. He'd been nut deep in random pussy 1,000 times before, but something about this girl made him lose his stamina faster than Tiger Woods lost his wife in endorsements. Without warning, Cinderella tightened her lips around his royal cock and began sucking and licking with ferocious intensity, like Winnie the Pooh desperately trying to get the last drop of honey from a jar. The prince could no longer contain himself. He reached down and pulled her off of him as he orgasmed, plastering her lovely face with a load of hot semen like a baker putting the final touch of frosting on a cake. Cinderella was shocked yet oddly attracted. It made her feel powerful to have millions of potential people on her face. "Damn, that shit was hot," the prince said between heavy breaths of relief. She looked up at him and smiled, though it was barely noticeable as her face looked like so it had been laminated. "I'm glad you liked it. I really want to make you happy." "Like it?" he replied while handing her a handkerchief he fished from his pocket. "I love that shit." Cinderella took the handkerchief and began wiping the cloudy off-white civilization from her face. Just as she was finishing, the castle's giant clock rang its bell with a thunderous sound. It was the first stroke of midnight. Cinderella let out a small gasp. "I'm sorry, I have to go," she cried. She stood up and began to run back through the ballroom. "Wait," the prince yelled out. "I don't even know your name," he said in a way that was uncharacteristic of most men. The clock continued to strike as the prince fumbled to put his penis away. It would be incredibly unprincely for him to expose his genitals in front of his entire kingdom, but the girl was getting away fast. He finally managed to hide himself and make his way back into the ballroom, but she was nowhere in sight. By the seventh stroke, Cinderella had already made it down the steps and into the courtyard. She was running so quickly one of her shoes came off, but she didn't stop to pick it up. When the prince finally arrived at the staircase, all he found was one of her beautiful glass shoes. There was no other sign. She was gone. A week had passed since the big ball, and throughout the kingdom, people talked of nothing but the mysterious woman who captured the prince's heart. Cinderella had thought about going to the prince, but was afraid he wouldn't love her if he knew she was a poor servant girl instead of an exotic princess. As she was busy mopping the kitchen floor, the Fugly sisters arrived home and began telling their mother news from the castle. A proclamation had been issued. The prince and his servants would tour the country until they found the girl who fit the shoe. Cinderella was elated when she heard this, and that night as she lay by the fire and drifted off to sleep, she smiled. It's only a matter of time before he finds me. She awoke the next morning to a flurry of activity once again in the living room. She groggily opened her eyes to find her stepmother and sisters gossiping wildly. "What's going on?" she asked sleepily. "You haven't heard? It's the prince. He found that girl from the ball." Cinderella was now wide awake. "What do you mean?" she asked, almost crying. "What do you think we mean?" the Fugly sister replied. "The prince found that girl and they're going to be married this afternoon." Those words cut through Cinderella like a knife cuts through Nicole Brown Simpson. How did that happen?" she choked out. Her stepmother spoke next. "God, you're slow, Cinderella. Get your ass upstairs and lay out our finest dresses. We've got a lot to do to attend the royal wedding." The next few hours went by in a blur for Cinderella. She could hardly remember what happened. As the carriage left to take her family to the wedding, she sat once again by the fire, crying. Her fairy godmother appeared behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, girl, how you doing?" "You again?" screamed Cinderella. "What the hell do you want now? My life's ruined. Was that what your plan was?" "Look, girl, my plan was for you to meet that prince. It ain't my fault you and that prince were some dumbass motherfuckers." Cinderella fell silent. "You were with him damn near 2 hours and not once did you tell him your name? And he didn't ask you what it was, neither. Then, boy genius decides to try and find you by the goddamn shoe? You think you're the only one in this kingdom wears that size? Girl, shit, I wear a size 7. I could have married the goddamn prince." Cinderella sat and absorbed this and couldn't stop her tears. "Sorry, girl, this shit ain't on me. It's on y'all. You can't just sit there and be a victim your whole life while you wait for a good one to find you. You want something? You gotta go grab that shit." For the first time in her life, she realized that was true. She broke down completely. "I just wanted him to love me," she said through her tears. "I know, sugar, but think about it. Did he really love you? That girl he's marrying don't look nothing like you, girl. He just picked her because the shoe fit. Quite frankly, I think he's just looking for that blowjob again." "You know about that? Girl, the whole kingdom knows about that. But don't worry, you know why? Because you're a good person, girl. A little naive, maybe, but you'll get there. Just be yourself, and maybe one day, you'll find yourself a real prince, girl, that loves you for you." Cinderella smiled as she felt her tears subside. She actually felt better about herself than she had in a long time. "Thank you, fairy godmother, for everything." "You're welcome, girl. Oh, one more thing. Grow a fucking dick and move the hell out of this house." And with that, she disappeared in a puff of smoke. Cinderella smirked. The smoke gave her an idea. 20 minutes later, Cinderella was walking briskly down the road, her stepmother's house ablaze in a massive fire behind her. She hummed to herself as she walked, taking great pride in making her evil family homeless. She decided to stop in her neighborhood tavern, the Zodiac, for a quick drink. As she sat at the bar and ordered a drink, a handsome young man approached her. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. "It is now," she replied with a wink. The young man held out his hand. "Hi, I'm Josh." She took his hand. "I'm Ella." And they lived happily ever after. Thank you very much.